Hey GBC students, thanks for tuning in to this week's Saturday morning cartoon. I'm your host, Stephen Humphreys. I have the privilege of being the student pastor at Grace Bible Church, and I want to welcome you to Saturday morning cartoons. Kick back, relax, and enjoy yourself. Before jumping into this week's episode, we wanted to start with a special rendition of Gomer jokes. As you know, Gomer is one of the main characters in the book of Hosea that we've been studying the past couple weeks in the student ministry at GBC. And some people have noticed that her name is a bit unusual. We even had one student say that if he were named Gomer, he would run away also. As you know, she runs away in the story from her husband, Hosea. We've also noticed that Gomer is kind of a mixture of two different movie/TV shows. The Lord of the Rings and The Simpsons. You take Gollum and you mix it with Homer and you get Gomer. I know, it seems cheesy, but we still laugh. That's the best I can say. Anyway, if your name is Gomer, I'll be the first to tell you it's a beautiful name. Quite unusual, but definitely beautiful. And hopefully your name's not Gomer. And as we're thinking about Gomer, we are reminded of Hosea and Gomer's love story. And as we agreed last week, we all love a good love story, at least most of the time we do. What we don't love is when that love story is broken up because somebody in the relationship was unfaithful. We call that cheating, or they were unloyal, or they abandoned the other person. We don't love when that happens. And usually the guilty party in that situation, we might even have resentment toward that person. We might, hope and desire that they get what is coming to them. But in fairness, as we talked last week about how when we have idols in our lives, it is as though we are being unfaithful to God. We are cheating on God. If we were to summarize our relationship with God in terms of a love story, we would be the person that we oftentimes have animosity towards or disdain towards because we're unfaithful. And God, on the other hand, is the faithful one. And as we learned last week, it breaks God's heart when we are unfaithful to Him, when we abandon Him, when we turn to idols and false gods to worship them. But again, it doesn't just break His heart, but it creates a mess in our lives. We can even look to Gomer's life as an example of this. If you remember in the story, she was married in a faithful relationship with Hosea, and her choice to leave and to be unfaithful and to juggle all these different relationships left her in really desperate situations. The Bible says that she was homeless, at times destitute, like she was parched in a desolate and weary land. It says that there was separation between her and her children. I can't imagine the amount of pain and trauma that brought both to her children and to herself. And then ultimately, because she was juggling so many different relationships with men that didn't really truly love her and just used her, she found herself in a situation financially where she incurred a debt that kept her enslaved. And see, we as human beings are no different than Gomer in that regard. Our choices lead us to a place where we become enslaved. Romans 6 says that we become enslaved to our sin. That we were so unfaithful, our choices regarding our relationship with God, we were so unfaithful that we trapped ourselves in enslavement to our sin. And in fairness, we're in such a desperate spiritual situation that we would naturally suspect that God would be done with us. That He would not rush to our aid. Why? Because we're unfaithful. We don't deserve His love. We don't deserve His faithfulness. And Gomer's in the same situation. She's burned the bridge with Hosea, and so we would suspect it to be over and her to be enslaved and trapped And by the way, in those days, women did not have the means to escape such a situation. They were just they were trapped. There was no chance for them to better themselves with employment. In those day and age, a job for a woman was a rarity. So really her only hope was to be in a loving relationship where she was able to be provided for. But in this situation, she abandoned that relationship and found herself enslaved to her situation. And again, we would not expect Hosea to run to her aid. But this is where the story between Hosea and Gomer gets so interesting. If you look at Hosea chapter 3 verse 1, it says that the Lord came again to Hosea and said, "Go again, show love to a woman who is loved by another man and is an adulteress. Just as the Lord loves the Israelites, though they have turned to other gods and love raisin cakes." See, God is telling Hosea, listen, I know she doesn't deserve it, but I want you to go love her again. And again, that's a picture of God's commitment to us. Even though we don't deserve it, God is going to show love to us again amidst our unfaithfulness, amidst the times where we abandon Him. He still wants to show His love to us. And it's interesting, if you go on to read in chapter 3 of Hosea, verse 2, it says, "So," this is talking about Hosea, "I bought her for 15 shekels of silver and 9 bushels of barley. I said to her, 'You are to live with me for many days. You must not be promiscuous or belong to any man, and I will act the same way towards you.'" See, what happened here is super significant. Remember, I said that Gomer found herself in a situation where she was enslaved. And I want you to notice that her only hope was for Hosea to sweep in and do something. And in this case, it says that he bought her for 15 shekels of silver and 9 bushels of barley. It's important to note that in those days, it was 30 shekels to buy somebody out of slavery, and Hosea only had 15. What this indicates to us is that he literally emptied his bank account. He took all the money he had, 15 shekels of silver, and he scrounged together resources in his house, in this case 9 bushels of barley, and he gave everything that he could to buy Hosea back. It was a sacrifice, a huge sacrifice, to love somebody who had been so unfaithful. And yet this is the very picture of what God does in our relationship with Him. He sacrifices everything so that He can have a relationship with us. Right? Jesus was sent, God's only Son, into this world to die an unbearable death so that we could have a relationship with God. That's amazing. That's incredible. That is true love put on display for all to see. That's a love story that is rivaled by no other love story that we know about. That is the true love story. And see, that's what God did for us. And I love how this chapter ends, because after Hosea goes and buys her back, he tells her, listen, now you are going to be faithful to me and I'm going to be faithful to you. And that's what God desires from us too. He wants us to trust Him. He wants us to put our faith in Him and to remain faithful to Him. Are there going to be times where we make mistakes? Yes. This is kind of where the analogy falls apart. Whereas Hosea and Gomer stayed committed to each other in a marriage relationship, we as followers of God oftentimes we veer off track and He draws us back. But the point that we can gain from this picture of Hosea and Gomer's love story is that God emptied the bank account of heaven for us to have a relationship with Him. That should make us giddy. That should make us excited that someone loves us that much that they would be willing to sacrifice everything just so they could be with us. And that's what God does for you. And that should encourage us. Again, I hope you join us soon for our next episode of Saturday Morning Cartoons. God bless you.